Today, we're going to talk about our planet Earth, and we're going to go back to our most recent past, basically our last save point in time, before the last fall of civilization. And we're going to uh, see if we can unlock some ancient codes and ancient history that we may have gotten smoke screened, confused. And with all the conspiracy theories out there and all the different versions of history, we're going to see if we can unlock the actual truth here. Okay. I picked this beautiful gem up when I was in Egypt, and this was actually not in a gift shop that you would expect to find it in if you go to the pyramids or the museum or something like that. Oh no, no, no. This was like off in a like hole in the wall joint, and it was like on the bottom shelf. And I was like, I want to bring this home because this is a perfect example of what our ancestors used to look like. We had the elongated heads because they were enlightened, and their consciousness was heightened in one with the earth, the sun, and the universe. And they had gifted abilities that we don't usually display today. And so I wanted to talk about that just a little bit today, okay? So, Earth. What can we learn about Earth? Well, one thing that we can learn is that this was not always this planet's name. Actually, if you're not from Earth, a lot of other galaxies call this planet uh, Terra. They call this planet Terra, and a lot of a lot of ancient, I would say, ancient societies knew this as well because if you come from another galaxy or star system, this is most likely what they are calling this planet, even though they don't speak, I would say, English, but this is what they would translate. It would be translated to, right? And so if you're not from Terra, um, you are basically considered, well, here on Earth, you're basically considered an extra terra extraterrestrial. Okay, so just let me back that up so you can see that. So Earth was not always this planet's name. This planet is actually known as Terra from other star systems. And if you're not from Terra, you are an extra terrestrial. And because we are from Earth, we are known as terrestrials. Okay? So I just want to let that sink in there. This planet is called Terra from other points of view. So you're probably wondering, how in the world did Earth get his name then? Well, the last fall of our society, that's how it got its name. You see, a long time ago, uh, we can actually use symbols to kind of unlock this truth here. Let's see if we can do that. So, a long time ago, back when we used to actually publicly do alchemy, this was the symbol for Earth. Okay? That was the symbol for Earth. When this planet was called Terra, we used to live in, I'd say, the heart. So we lived in the heart. This was when we lived in the heart era, I would say. So this is what they called the heart era. The heart era. Now we're called Earth. And how is that even possible? Well, because when you take, what happened was we fell. We fell from living in the heart. And when you take the H, you take the H and you put it at the end, you cut off the head and you put it at the end, you get Earth. But when you put the H back at the top, you get the heart. You see? You get the heart. And so we used to actually live in the heart era. Now we kind of operate inside of this tiny man syndrome where we all think that we're less than. And we're all told to uh, we're all told to kind of worship and we live in a box mentality where science kind of tells us these are the laws, these are the rules, and that's why people think certain things. And we live in this tiny man syndrome where we're told to worship a higher power that we call Jesus. All right, we're all told to worship somebody named Jesus, and hope that he has, him and God show mercy on us and all this stuff. You see, there was a time though where when we looked like this, we weren't called extraterrestrials. We were just called terrestrials because we were living in the heart and our consciousness was elevated. And you're probably wondering, how in the world was that even possible? Well, uh, we were living in the spirit, and we were seeing the world from different angles, and we were ascended much taller. We were much taller back then. um, and our lifespan was a lot longer. And on top of that, our heart and our consciousness was bigger than it is today. But a lot of people wouldn't know that because this isn't what we're taught in school. We're not allowed to know the truth because we were once an enlightened society that, yes, we did come from another star system. We came from many star systems that actually. We're not the only we're not the only there's not wasn't just one race that interacted with human beings on this planet. It wasn't just the Anunnaki. It wasn't just Pleiadians. There were actually beings from the Sirius star system, Lyra star system. Um, where else? Trying to think of all the other star systems. There's so many that interacted with Earth over the years that you can't really put a finger on and say, these are the true gods. These are the true extraterrestrials or aliens that seeded life on Earth. And this wasn't always called Earth. This was called Terra. This place was called Earth after the consciousness was cut. The consciousness was cut off, and we just became human. We just became human. And we fell into our lower state of being, and we were told to worship a higher power. We were no longer allowed to know the truth because it was other there were other beings that interacted with terrestrials, with Earth, and they told us lies. And you're probably wondering how something like that could happen. Well, because there was wars. There were wars, and the people that were left behind had to pick up the pieces. And you know, whoever wins the wars writes history. Remember that. Whoever wins the wars writes history. And we were all told to worship a dead body hanging on the cross. And if you didn't, then you all know what happens next. You all know what happens next. God would punish you, and you would go to HE double hockey sticks. And this is where the H in earth came from at the end. Because now we are living in hell. We are already in hell. And you wouldn't know you were in hell because, the devil is a genius at cloaking himself. So you don't know that you are already suffering in his kingdom, coming back in an endless loop, reincarnating over and over in a different perspective, told to worship a higher power. This right here is what a lot of the witch trials were about. It was about putting a stake and burning these people with heightened consciousness, burning them alive and calling them the devil. And granted, some people were practicing dark magic, but not all of them. Not all of them. So a lot of it was, chasing tails, chasing ghosts. But when we fell away from the heart, we started living in hell. We started living in hell. And it's unfortunate because, all we have to do is rebuild ourselves, recreate ourselves, and remember who we are. And what's interesting is when they burn these people, if they were actually people that were of the light, mystics of the light, and they didn't practice dark magic, and they were just heightened in consciousness, and they crucified these people and burned these people alive, they didn't. Those people weren't afraid because they would separate themselves from their body ahead of time, and so their soul would actually be hovering over the body while this is happening. And so those people would not even be screaming. They wouldn't even scream out and suffer because they already detached themselves from their body. That was a practice that was an art that was practiced by the ancient ones, I'd like to say. And it's okay, not everybody understands what's different, and they're afraid of things that they don't understand, so they end up crucifying these people. And when they did that, they ended up crucifying the consciousness of earth. But it isn't until humanity realizes that we are one with the earth, and we actually break out of this box that we were told to live in, we can free ourselves from this hell. It doesn't take a lot to kind of wake up and realize that events playing out in mainstream news are meant to keep us bound to this crazy, crazy world that we're living in, bound to living in fear, bound to a old way of living. We don't have to live like that anymore. We can choose to accept the fact that, like I've said before, as long as I live, I am the living word of God. I am the living word of God. I am more than a man or a woman living in this body. This body doesn't belong to me, it belongs to the earth, and I'm just borrowing it while I'm here. We are all the son and daughters of the Creator, and we can choose to live in power and bloom like a beautiful flower and shine in the light and ray of the sun. Activating our third eye and seeing past the veil, we will see a reflection of our own self, walking this earth as what some societies would call gods. But none of us are actually gods. We are all one with the creator of the universe. So, we can choose to continue to live in captivity and live in a crazy, messed up version of, Burning Man. Or we can become the fire and flame on. This is our planet. And this planet is called Terra. It's only called Earth if you live in the lower material realm. The lower half of your body, this is what we've been kind of going through our life thinking from the lower half of our body. Keeping ourselves grounded. But remember the Vitruvian Man when Leonardo da Vinci showed another version of ourself where we are actually able to elevate. Elevate. Jumping jacks. We can learn to fly. And you don't need a spacesuit to go to space. All we have to do is expand our consciousness. And we can become one with the universe again. When this planet was called Terra, we didn't need a spacesuit to go to space. We would expand our consciousness and we would be able to communicate with our neighbors in other planets. They still do this today. They'll have meetings and council meetings from other planets, and they won't even leave their home planet. They won't have to because their consciousness is expanded. They can literally remote view. And this is all information that is kept secret by who we call the Freemasons of the world, who decided to commercialize and take the builders, the knowledge of the builders who built the pyramids and build the societies around the world and capitalize on that information. You see the Freemason logo, you'll see they'll have a big G in the middle, right? Now you know what that big G is. We have a choice. We can continue down the current destructive path that we're on, or we can decide to go back to living in the heart and become a society that is showing empathy, sympathy, and love and compassion to one another. Or we can continue down the current path that the Freemasons have us on, and we will burn. Society will fall again. It's inevitable. They will fall again. And their goal is absolute power. Their goal is absolute power. And the only thing they will find is absolute destruction. That is 100% for certain, that they will find 100% destruction, absolute destruction. Because that is the path that we're on right now. So we can choose to go back to living in the heart. And saving this planet. Make this guy a little taller. We can extend our lifespan, and we will actually be able to get off of this planet, or we can just go exactly towards our current trajectory, our current path, and that's destruction. And that's just the truth. When we were here, society was happier. We were power, energy. You didn't have to pay for energy. Energy was something that was a given. It was like a part of society. Agriculture, growing, producing food was not something where, it had become so expensive that some people were priced out. It's not supposed to be that way. I think now, if we want to make a difference, the best thing we can do is, especially the people that are able, we start our own communities. We detach ourselves from this crazy lifestyle that they want us to live in, and we create our own communities where we are self-sustaining, self-sufficient, and we don't have to continue to just participate in this crazy nonsense that people in suits and ties want to get us involved in, you know and that's just the truth of the matter. And what happened in the past was, well, it happened slowly over time. The culture became corrupted by external forces that did end up making their way into the society and corrupting the hearts of the men and women that walk this earth. And so, they fell. And eventually, over time, we all continued to reincarnate, and it got to a point where those that reincarnated, their X gene was activated in their DNA, and we began to remember who we are and why we're here, and we realized that, wait a minute, all of this stuff, we recognize it from our past lives. And the world shouldn't be this way. And we realized what happened. They took the information and they made secret societies out of it. And they made governments out of it, and nations and religions. They made religions, whether you're Muslim, Catholic, Christian, Jewish, it doesn't matter. They're all factions of war. If you look around, look at who's at war. And look at who's starting wars over religion. The United States wants to go to war with a country over religion. Israel at war with two different countries over religion. Russia claiming Nazism. You can say religion in that. India, Pakistan. It doesn't make any sense. These countries with nuclear weapons, planet destroying weapons aimed at ourselves. That is not a human idea. That is an extraterrestrial idea that came from the negative extraterrestrials, the ones that are malevolent,